Hey everybody, my name is Philip Martin and I'm the co-owner of Philip Martin Gallery here in Los Angeles. Usually takes people just a minute or so to come into the webinar, so let me see here how we are doing. I am really thrilled to be talking today with Laurie Nye on the subject of her recent show. Okay, so I think we probably can go ahead and get going. It's good to see we've got a bunch of people coming in here, so that's really nice. So my name's Philip Martin. I'm the co-owner of Philip Martin Gallery with my wife, Portia Hine, and you might have met her either at the gallery or at the fairs. We are open now with regular hours, so if you'd like to come by, please do. We did a webinar last week for Sky Glavish for his show, which is currently on view through the end of the year at the gallery. It's called The Weight of Light. And I'm really thrilled to be having a chance to talk with Laurie Nye about the recent show that we just did called It Wasn't a Dream, It Was a Flood at the gallery. It's been really exciting. How are you doing today, Laurie?
I'm doing good. I'm here in Tennessee again. Doing great.
So I thought today would be kind of a nice time for us just to talk about the show. I mean, often we do a talk during the show, but here you kind of have a little bit of distance since it's been a couple weeks. And of course, you had this remarkable Art Forum article, which was really exciting. Congratulations for being a best of 21 by Art Forum. How is the show sitting with you? What are you thinking about in terms of the show?
I'm still digesting it, to be honest with you. Yeah, some of the work was made here in Tennessee and some of the work was made in Los Angeles. So that was an interesting kind of new, like transition for me and how I work. But it was fairly fluid, thankfully. So it was interesting actually to have start some of the work in Tennessee, here in Tennessee, and then take it to LA and finish it there because the light is so different. So when I got it to California, I was like, oh crap, how am I going to finish this painting? Because I don't understand the color.
Right.
And how it changed, I was like, okay, I need to think about this for a minute. So a lot of stuff happened. I changed lights in my studio and tried to warm things up so I could kind of.
Can you be more specific about how the light of the two places affected color? I mean, Italy is famous for its light. California is famous for its light.
Oh man, the light is so different. The light here is cooler. The light in California is more yellow, and it's, you see a lot of yellow in my work. So when I'm here, I just don't know. It just affects my palette, and there's nothing I can do, to change that. It's just what happens. Also, the changing of the seasons kind of makes me paint a certain way. So I'm thinking about the seasons because I'm here. The trees are empty of their leaves. It's crazy weather. And then when I go to California, of course, it's crazy weather there too right now, but the light is just so bright and so everywhere. And I really enjoy sunsets in California because that's when this transition happens with the light. And that is just my favorite time of day.
Yeah.
In California. So because the constant light is not my favorite thing. I'm not that's probably controversial to say because I think Californians absolutely love their sunlight. But for me, I enjoy the clouds. I enjoy the changing of the seasons. I enjoy when it rains. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that a bunch of people are going to crawl through the screens and punch us in the face. But to continue with this theme and to just go on a half an hour conversation about California weather, I have to say that I'm from Bloomington, Indiana, so not far from Memphis, and Bloomington has 4 seasons. And of course, a lot of your sources are people who are thinking about seasons and thinking about color. I was oddly pleased to find out that while Californians are always complaining about seasonal affective disorder when they leave California, when you're standing next to them at like a cold bus stop in Chicago. There is the reverse, and it is odd here because you do have this unrelenting sun that weirdly can be depressing, I think. I mean, now it's a thing. There's a reverse seasonal affective disorder. And also, I think the feeling of rain, the feeling of how the earth tells you what is going on. I think, I know you're a gardener and I'm a gardener too. For me, actually understanding California really didn't come for me until I started looking at native plants and understanding that, like, in the winter now is actually like our summer, it's our verdant time, and that the summer is actually this harsh time because it's when everything is so stressed. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's lots of places to go from that, because of course your work is about California, it's about Tennessee and these various legacies. It's about humans on the planet. Where do you want to go from my preamble?
Great, Philip. Open it up to the most widest thing. Let me narrow that back down. Let me think about that. I think about landscape from an internal place. So my going back and forth, that's not something I ever really wanted. I didn't want to be so transient, but I am. Here we go. And because I really do value being in my home state and being in this place and just being in a recognizable place for me, like it just is comforting. And I also have there's a value for me in California with the landscape there and what I've kind of grown to love about it.
Yeah.
And my friendships there and the community there. So I really think that all kind of is there in the work, but because I work from such an internal place, I'm constantly drawing, I'm constantly thinking, and whatever comes out. It could be like, that I'm inspired by this song, and I know that I'm going to make, a new series of trees and flowers, and this song is like making me think about whatever it's making me think about. And then I'm making a painting based on that. But you know what I mean? The color is coming from the external things, like where I am located. So color is a different thing for me. Like it is symbolic, but I can be affected by the place that I'm in as well.
Did you have goals with color in the works that we're looking at?
No goals. No.
Were there themes that kind of came together for how you were using color, or things you noticed about color relationships?
Definitely things I noticed about color relationships. I noticed that I was very yellow and orange and blue and pink. And that is where I am. I know I went through a phase with red and pink before, like a couple of years ago. And I go through color phases, and with the landscape, this is where I'm at, and those are the colors that appeal to me. And they're just happening. I mean, it's definitely not forced, that's for sure. It's just, I think that's where the symbolism or this kind of symbolic color comes into the paintings.
Yeah.
And I think they're kind of warmer, happier colors, just like that kind of feeling. Yeah. So
it's interesting in the two that we were looking at, I was very struck by this painting called Country Home, which is the one here on the far right.
Yeah.
And the one, of course, in the middle is called It Wasn't a Dream, It Was a Flood. And they have very different colors. So am I correct then in thinking that Country Home, which obviously refers to a place in Tennessee, is more of that light from Tennessee, perhaps?
That was me looking at a Klimt painting and being like, wow, Klimt is so amazing. And I had these pictures and trying to capture like what is mom's place like to me, and that was like mom's house. So I was just trying to get an idea. I mean, I was just trying to riff on that.
Yeah.
Somehow I've always been a huge fan of Klimt since I was a much younger painter.
Yeah.
And everyone, has to bow down to Klimt. I mean, his landscapes are the shit. Like, they're small. They're so small. Typically they're small, but they're just insane. And this is not a Klimt painting. I'm not making a Klimt painting, obviously, but I just enjoyed the idea of that. And I kind of made a painting in response to it. And it's very green and yellow and fine.
We talked a fair amount about sort of your background in textile design and your interest in some of the Viennese artists. Do you want to talk a little bit more about, now that we've talked just, about, I don't know, some of the European artists that you might be thinking about, or that are, because they do come up, people will discuss them in relationship to your work.
Oh, I mean, I've always been I've been fascinated for a long time with the Wiener Werkstatt. We talked about that, and just all those artisans and designers and painters and makers, and that style has always appealed to me. And it was actually introduced to me by my father, strangely, because he was not an artist, but he had an eye. And that was back when I was an undergrad. And so I was doing surface design, and I was painting on silk. And I see a continuation, like I see myself doing that kind of in my work now, where I deal with spaces in this flat way. Like I deal with spaces in this interesting way where I kind of delineate spaces. And I noticed that. And I also, there's like this kind of abundance of flora, fauna imagery, or whatever imagery. It's like horror back, we like filling the space with like just images. I kind of have a tendency to go there at times, and I'm good with that. So I think that is also something that the Wiener Werkstatt, it was just like color everywhere, pattern everywhere, a very thoughtful design that I was always obsessed with. There was a structuralism to it that really appeals to me. And again, that's because I was working on always these rectangles of silk and thinking about things in this very specific kind of way back then, until I moved into painting.
And what about a painting like this? Because this painting has a different kind of feelings to it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was thinking, this is where the nonlinear way of me working comes in. I just wanted to make a cloud painting. I have these pictures. I constantly take pictures. So I have these pictures of what the sky looks like here. The sunsets here are really different, I think, than the ones in California. And they're equally beautiful here. They're just very different and darker and deeper.
Because we don't have any clouds. Because we basically never have any clouds.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, there's just a humidity here, and it's just different color. So yeah. And I kind of riffed on that. And then this color is kind of related to the Venusian show I did, Venusian weather but I did at the Pit a couple 4 years ago.
Yep.
And I did start kind of making these clouds and it was much more, that show is very neon, it's very colorful. And I think I pulled a little bit up from that into this painting. And it's just a continuation of that, something that I was thinking about looking at, describing something, but in this other way, this kind of way that I do it, I guess, that is not realistic, So I was trying to get a feeling, and I was trying to make it more minimal. This is my minimal painting.
Yeah.
This is a minimal painting for me.
Yeah, totally minimal. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you're raising a lot of topics there. And one of the things I did like from the Art Forum article was a quote that Jane McFadden sort of brought to my attention, because I don't know the work of Simon Shamas, who said that landscapes are culture before they are nature. And she talked a little bit about how your work kind of is a commentary on how we see, imagine, and experience an idea of nature.
I get that. I totally get that. I mean, that's how I work. I mean, I it's hard for me to paint something as it is. That's just not in my DNA. And I want to try to do that. Like, I really try to, I can sit there and draw something as it is. Right. I mean, this painting is actually from life.
Yeah.
It's actually a place that I go walk,
Mhm.
and it's a park nearby. But
Mhm.
it doesn't, obviously it doesn't look like what it looks like, what it looks like in my mind, but it's not what it looks like in reality. And um yeah, I mean, I paint with feeling, and I paint with kind of the weight of a lot of things. And um
Is there a point just in terms of your practice? I mean, if you say you're working from life or starting from something, how does it come about? Do you start with some initial stuff and then other ideas crop in and you start adding parts to parts of the canvas, or how do you end up with this expression of your vision as it comes? How does it work? Like, what's it like when you put a pencil to a page or start working?
um if I draw a painting out, or if I think about a painting ahead of time, it's really loose. If I do a drawing, it's usually a thumbnail, and I don't work, I don't project anything. It just starts with the canvas and me starting to paint on it and having the
Mhm.
idea of what I'm going to paint. Um, and I usually just start there with an underpainting.
Mhm.
An underpainting kind of gives me a lot of freedom. And then as I'm painting it, I know I want certain color relationships, or, I'll be looking at a book on the Nabis or German Expressionism, or I just like to look at the masters and look at
Mhm.
their color and think
Mhm.
about it. And, I know I have my own kind of relationship to color, but sometimes I want to punch it a little bit. And
Mhm.
because I don't use black lately, so I'm like, where's the contrast, Laurie? Like, what do you want this to have more contrast?
Right.
Where is that? And things like that will happen that are formal, and then other things will happen, like with the fountain one we were just looking at, that kind of fountain with the stripes.
Mhm.
That kind of came out of drawings, color pencil drawings that I've done for several years. That is just a tendency that I have. Like, again, it's pattern that ends up happening. And that was kind of fun for me. I was like, I wondered if those drawings would ever kind of make their way into paintings, just the way
Mhm.
I draw it. I think they're a little different, but I wanted them to meld, I wanted them to come together. So I was happy that that kind of happened.
Well, this
But
is
it was
also a striking painting because obviously you're using a lot of yellow, and a lot of people might be using white for their higher values, and you're using yellow for a lot of those lighter values. Also, of course, yellow has temperature and intensity, but it does mean that the white that you're using, and while there may be some whites in the yellows, the white that's in the water then really, like, it's pops. You're using white as a color effectively in this, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a very weird thing that happened. Like, I think a lot of people see that as a figure or whatever. I mean, vortex, I don't know, but it does make it interesting, I do think. Yeah. And then this painting was a really loose sketch. I wish I had that sketchbook. I would show you. Um, it was just a loose sketch idea, and then I sketched it out pretty quickly as a charcoal um, on the canvas. And I think that is why, and I don't always do that. I do that sometimes, but I think that's why this one is quieter in places. Like, there's, like, in the tree, there's not as much information in the actual, like, part, the tree
And this
itself,
part.
like that part of the tree.
Mhm.
It's not filled with information, but the
Mhm.
information is like on the, on the inside.
Mhm.
So I had fun making this. This kind of summarizes a lot of things that I think that I find exciting in a painting.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the last paintings that you made for the show, is it not?
Yeah, super fast. I made it super fast. And I think that's another thing. It's like, when you're working that way, you're throwing any kind of, it's just all instinct, and you're throwing a
Mhm.
lot of things out the window and just working from it was just pure energy. And, like, what do I want out of this moment? And being, not self-conscious about the color. And yeah, it was it was, yeah, it's a good thing.
And there are several kind of landscapes more like this one in the show. What's kind of going on in this painting?
This is kind of a self-portrait. It's called Country Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you've heard of Country Mouse, City Mouse. And then my ex, he wrote this wonderful little book called Country Mouse. And his work, it's kind of how my painting is, actually. His writing is a lot like my painting.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's a lot of beautiful things in the South. And I was trying to just describe something about how I saw my youth and how lucky I, you know, like I am to, you know, have had that nurture, you know, even though my family, they aren't necessarily artists, they supported that always, you know, especially like my mom and my dad. And growing up on the river, we would go to the river every weekend. We had a houseboat called the Laurie Nye. My dad named after me. And so, and I went fishing, you know, I went fishing with my dad, you know, starting from day one. So, you know, that's what I grew up with.
Right.
And I know that's an idealized way of looking, you know, there's much more to the South, obviously, it's very dark. And I always describe the South as like a beautiful, wonderful, you know, landscape, verdant landscape with, you know, a dark underbelly that is there and that's really on the surface.
Yeah. Well, it's a complex place, and I think I'm going to Georgia and South Carolina later this week. I think it's somewhere that, as you say, it's very beautiful and it has a very long history that some people know and some people don't. And the people that I think it's like anywhere you might go, the Midwest or wherever, a lot of times if people have never been there, they have very pronounced ideas about it. If you have been there, then it's a complex reality, of course. And anyway, this connection to nature, and there's a very specific kind of deep enveloping nature that's very visceral that you feel there, that is very different than California, for sure. At least to me. California is majestic and stunning, but it doesn't. I feel like it doesn't. Maybe if you're in the redwoods, it's a different experience. But here in Southern California, it's not like what I grew up with. But here's a painting based on the Huntington.
Yeah, I love the Huntington. I went there with my friend Rebecca Morris, and you know, just looking at I'm always painting irises, you know, I'm kind of obsessed with them.
Yeah.
And I took a bunch of pictures again. And I was just trying to get the vibe of that flower without trying to overly explain it. Because there's just so much going on in these flowers. Like there's so much detail in them too. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to like try to make this crazy O'Keeffe thing. I don't know. You know, I just love those flowers. So I was like, I'm going to make one, you know, it's a small moment in the show. And I feel like those moments are just as important to me as those more kind of epic kinds of things I'm trying to paint or whatever, or more.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting moment of close reading next to a painting like this one.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got about 5 more minutes. I'm not very good personally at looking at the chat or anything like that. I don't know if you're more skilled in that area, or if there are things that maybe you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about thus far.
I don't know what's going on in the chat either. I can't even access it. I'm like, I teach on Zoom, so I'm terrible at this. I'm always like getting the kids like, or whoever, who's saying what on chat?
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Are there things you want to talk about in the show that we haven't talked about thus far?
Oh,
okay.
You know,
I did the chat. Someone has asked, what are you doing next?
Oh, well, I've been working on a few paintings. And you have those. We are not looking at them right now, but
No, I ended up showing these paintings, but there are several new paintings. You posted some to Instagram, and we will be showing some of those coming up in the spring, I think.
yeah, I've done a couple of paintings that kind of stemmed or kind of, I just started painting, like after the show, I just started painting. I didn't really like have a plan,
Yeah.
but I had a couple of good sized canvases. So I made this painting, Mauve Mountain, which is inspired by this Kuno Emiet painting.
Mhm.
And his is very minimal. And again, I maximalized it. I just ripped off of it. But so I made that painting and played around with kind of an impressionistic kind of way of painting it. And then made another painting, My River Runs to Thee. And it was inspired by a Dickinson kind of poem, but it's, it's another painting inspired by my growing up around rivers. And I live in a river town, so River City. And then I'm working on work here. So I've actually I'm working on this piece right now, which is maybe almost done.
Yeah.
So I'm working on flowers and trees right now.
You have a project coming up in New York.
Yeah, in April. So I've got to get in the garage. Got to get in the garage.
Get in the garage.
I'm just working on the easel right now. That's how I can kind of get my headspace wrapped around it and being in Tennessee. And then I'll go into the garage and start painting a bigger piece.
Okay, I got another question here in the chat. Can you talk about materials, in particular mediums or special surface prep that you might use?
I always start with an underpainting, and that is just how I roll. I love the color brown pink. That's because I really like warm colors. In terms of right now, I'm into warm colors, and I usually start with that color, that brown pink.
Sanded Belgian linen.
Sanded Belgian linen.
Gesso.
Gessoed.
And
yeah.
the underpainting might be what, a color field?
This painting actually is oil-based primed linen. So I worked on this flat. To be clear, I worked on this unstretched, which was a new thing for me, but I had to do it because of the constraints of being here in a garage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then I started with a couple of like underpainting colors, like the brown pink and maybe some ochres or whatever in that other one, and I kind of built up from there. Started to kind of build the color from that. This one I probably I feel like I started in a different kind of color underpainting. You could tell, and I don't remember what it was, but maybe it was like in the green territory.
This painting does have a distinct color, which is how we had that earlier conversation about it. It does feel very different.
It is very different. You can see that, you can feel that in the light in this painting is very different, and it has a different kind of light in it. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I started with a more yellow or green underpainting. This one is a smaller one, and started with the underpainting again, but a kind of more vivid underpainting with like a little more orange in it. So that blue would really pop. It's just a little painting.
And you can actually see a little bit of the color of the linen right there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's been a real treat. It always is, Laurie. We always have a fun time.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Okay, there's one more question in the chat. Do you have a second for it? We'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, good. They're just saying that they liked it. I haven't thanked the audience. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's really nice to see so many people coming out. I really liked doing these conversations during COVID, the webinar, and I still love them so much. It's so fun to take time to sit down and really enjoy the community of artists that are around you. And it's so neat that there's lots of ways to kind of learn about people. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. If you guys have any questions or want to ask anything, just let me know. And, have a great holiday season to everybody. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas to all and everyone out there, and Kwanzaa and everything everyone might need. So see you later.
Happy holidays.
Okay, take care. Bye.